In this video, I'm going to show you how to create and manage a budget in a spreadsheet. Now, you can use a lot of different services. There's a lot of apps that can do this type of work, but I prefer a spreadsheet because it's not hidden behind an algorithm, and I can see more of the information and make my plans accordingly. Sometimes when you use something that automatically tracks and puts things into categories, it's easy to get lost of where your money's actually going. And while if that's what fits best for you, then go ahead and use one of those. But in this video, I'm going to focus on a spreadsheet because I think that that's the most powerful tool for really being able to manage your money well. All right, let's get to it. First, I need to create a category for income. If you're not making any money, there is no budget. So we need to make some money. So I'll put my name there and income from my wife. And then I always, no matter what, I always put an other category. The reason for another category is that there are times where money comes in that you don't want it to affect your future planning in future years as you look back in time. And you want to know that it was some sort of separate event. And so I always have an other category there. And then I want to put usually you do budgeting by months, but if you get paid every 2 weeks, you might do it that way, but most things end up being paid monthly. And so I'm going to go for 2020, that's going to come up with April 20th. Now I'm going to show you a little trick here. It's nice to actually, if you're first getting started out, have 2 columns per month, and I'll explain why in a second. But to do so, you go over here, there's a little icon here that's got 2 arrows facing away, or facing towards, I can't even tell, it's so small. I'm going to click Merge and Center, and now it's a header of both of those columns. The reason for 2 columns is that I want one to be about my projected, what I think I'm going to make, and the other one to actually track as I make money, as money comes in, to actually input it there so I know what I'm actually bringing in. And so the 2 categories end up being either projected or budgeted and actual. This is very common for any sort of budget, especially if you were to work for a company and deal with finances there. So I'm trying to make this simple though, so we're not going to go into too much detail. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and go, say after taxes, I bring in $4,000. Say my wife who's doing some stuff from home, maybe she makes some money here, and then other, I just never budget for anything unless there is some tiny thing that's coming in right now. Okay, and then I want to have a total. I want to know how much that is in total. Okay, so first of all, we need to do some formatting. I'm going to go ahead and select all of these rows, and I want them to be in money. So I'm going to go from general to currency. Okay, you'll notice that it didn't change the text to currency because it noticed that that was text. And then here's our first formula. You need to know formulas to be able to use a spreadsheet. This is one of the main reasons why people use the apps, is because they don't know how to use these formulas, but they're pretty simple. So I'm going to type equals in, and then I can type in a formula. You have to type in equals to tell it you're doing an equation or a formula. And then I'm going to say sum, as in the sum, adding up. Start a parentheses here, and then I have to tell it what to sum up. And so I can just kind of click and select those columns and hit enter. Okay. And then what I can do now is I can actually copy this here, and then as far out as I want, if I hit shift while I click, I can copy that formula, and so now it'll add those three bits of information. And so as money comes in, you know, if a paycheck came in the middle of the month and it was for that exact amount, I could put that there, and I can start tracking those expenses and making a comparison between those two. Or sorry, not expenses, those income. Speaking of expenses, that's where we need to go. Next, we need to have a section for expenses. Now, here's where it's going to really vary, person by person, household by household. Depending on who you are, what your planned expenses are going to be vastly different. I'm going to put some general categories, but you need to know that you need to specifically hone in on what your expenditure categories are. They're going to be very different if you're just living from home and working, or if you're going off to college, or if you're moving out and living on your own and having to pay rent and all that. So I'm going to put in housing. That's definitely a big common expense. There's food. And then for most of you starting to go out on your own, you're going to have some sort of cell phone or internet, or both. You might have some electricity, water, so utilities of some kind. You might have car insurance, health insurance, life insurance, a lot of insurance categories. There might be some medical expenses. There might be student loan debt that you have to pay off. There's a bunch of different things that you could put in here. Obviously, you're going to need to like buy clothing, and how you decide how to put all these things. Also, entertainment. And I'm going to stop here just for the sake of the screen, but so we don't go off the screen. But you need to think about what are the things that are priority to me. And then what you also need to have is some sort of category that allows for sort of these like one-time or unique expenses. So I'm just going to put miscellaneous here. Miscellaneous, if I can say that right, spell it right, there we go. But you can categorize it as another other, or as one-time purchases, or something that's unique. What you don't want this category for is just, I don't know where to put it. No. This is something that you made a distinct expenditure that you know was outside of your budget. So you want a place to track it, but it's not something that you're going to necessarily budget for. It's something that you're going to make a decision about, looking at the actual actual income and actual expenses, and go, oh, I do actually have room for this. So I need some place to track it, but it's not in my normal budgeting. Okay. And then lastly, I always, we need total expenditures. So we're going to do the same sort of thing here. Say rent was a grand, and food, and selling internet, and utilities. And again, this is all depending on, your situation. Things could change quite drastically for you. And then I recommend not putting anything in for this miscellaneous category, just for my own experience, that it's nice to have a category that isn't a budget, but it's for tracking things that you've made a decision. I'm going to spend money outside my budget. I have the money, and so this is where it's going to go. Okay, we're going to total these up just like before. Equals, sum, start of parentheses, all those columns, enter. Okay, and so we're going to go ahead and do that and copy that and go just as far down. I'm going to hold the shift button down when I click. Click here and paste it in. Okay. Oh, it looks like I need to go into changing the format to currency. There we go, to make sure it's all into currency. And then the last section that we need is a sort of total to see where we're headed here. So, so I'm just going to call this totals, and we have our total income, our total expenses. Okay, and then in a business you would call this profit or loss, but I'll just call it plus or minus. I was like, what do I want to call it? Oh, it's not even going to let me do that. Ugh, okay. Does it let me do it if I put in quotes? Okay, whatever. You figure it out. For whatever reason, I'm just spacing on what to call this right now. And so I'm going to make this, I'm just going to hit the equals button, and then I'm going to click this button of the total income right there. Click the cell there, hit enter, hit equals on expenses, click there, and then, of course, what I have left over is the top one minus the bottom one, income minus expenses. And then the last thing that I'm going to go ahead and copy this here, and let's see here. Paste it so it's all there. Last thing I want to do is go down to this bottom cell that is this tracking the plus minus, and I want to do something called conditional formatting. And that's up here. You can see it, and you can create highlight rules. And so what I want to know is, hey, I want to be warned if I'm spending more than I'm making. That seems like a problem. So if this is less than, if it's less than 0, if the cell value is less than 0, I want it to turn red. Okay. So that would mean that if, say, in this category, say I had, my rent was like $992, and my food I spent a little bit more, and I'm just making up numbers right now. So things, but the bottom line is these numbers are rarely exactly what you expected. Okay, and then say I made a one-time purchase. Okay, And so hopefully down here, yep, it says that I lost $432.13, and it shows up in red to highlight, oh, that's something I need to be paying attention to. You want something to highlight for you, something you need to pay attention to because you might be losing money. All right, now I'm going to show you a few more things. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and paste that here, but obviously it's a different month. So what you can do is actually hit equals, and if you took the average length of a month in a leap year, the longest year that we have, so this year, 2020 is a leap year, the average month is 30.5 days. So if I take this month here and I add 30.5, okay, now it says May, and if I copy and paste this, okay, it'll eventually get off, but like 30, 40 years in the future. So I can just take this and paste this cell by cell here. And actually, let me go ahead and copy and then shift it down and go out quite a bit in the future. And we'll see what this last month is, November 2022. So there's just a little trick to making that work. And so now here we go. We have got our budgeted line, our actual tracking expenses line, and we can see the difference. So in this example, we could see, hey, I didn't bring as much money as I thought, but I spent more money than I thought. And where are those categories in which I was off? And then I can make sort of future predictions. So at this point, I'm actually going to stop showing you this sort of sample one and show you one I actually use. It's different than this, and I'll explain the differences, but it's pretty close. So let me show you my actual spreadsheet that I use for my family. Okay, first, this is different software. This is Apple's Numbers. I like it because it's easier to do sort of completely separate tables. And so there's these nice empty spaces. It's just visually something I like, but obviously not everyone. This is only available if you've got an Apple product. So you can do it online. I think if you've got like an iPhone or something, you can do it in a browser, even on a Windows computer. But for the most part, this is if you've got a Mac. So anyway, as you can see, I've got those categories. I've got income, I have expenses, and then down below we've got the category of total, and I've got some things to just sort of highlight. In fact, I've got two highlights. One is here just in the expenses category. It's highlighted in red if that number is ever greater than the income. So if the expenses are ever greater than income, I highlight it in red, and then of course down here in the total, that matches with the highlight in red and showing me how much money it actually is more than we brought in that month. Okay. Another difference in ours is that I don't have like a separate thing for actual and budgeted. In fact, what I have is that you can see in May 2020, I keep numbers in bold if they are the budgeted numbers, so projecting out into the future, these are all budgeted numbers, and then I unbold them as soon as I start adding in information into there. Okay. Another thing to note is that some of the categories are going to have multiple things, like when you buy groceries, you don't just do that once a month. That's multiple times, and so I'm going to show you real quick. I'm just going to click on this and show you. I typed in equals, and then I just literally added up as I tracked along. And then what happens is if I get another expense in the future, I just click in here and I just add the next expense. Say it was like $31.50, and I just add that in. Okay, I didn't actually have that expense, so I don't want to put it in there. And so I can actually track as I go along and do that kind of work. So first thing I want to just kind of show you in just a regular sort of real-world spreadsheet is that no matter what, like expenses change and your budget never matches. You can see this month our groceries and miscellaneous were way less than the surrounding months. And it had nothing to do with us eating less food. It had to do with like timing of when we went grocery shopping. Maybe we went grocery shopping right at the end of July and right at the beginning of September, and very little in the month of August. And so there are some things like that. And then you can see things like here where we had just massive expenditures one month, but if you look at the months these months here, we had massive income, and so we were able to like pay down debt, pay off some things that were expensive. And so things change, and we want to track those. The other thing that I've done in my personal one here is for expenses that will likely go up over time, things like insurance, utility bills. What I would do is, and when I project these out, I actually make them equal the year before. So this April 2021 equals what it cost in this month for water and electricity, but then I multiplied it by a 4% increase just to budget conservatively. Maybe it goes up less than 4%. Maybe it goes up more, but I want to kind of get a sense that as I'm projecting forward, things are going to get more expensive, and I need to be prepared for that. And as I'm tracking in the future, I'm really looking down below at this line, are my expenses too high? And you can see all of a sudden, boom, in October 2021, they do become too high. And as I look down here, we're going to need to find either a way of bringing in a couple $100 extra dollars or saving that money. And so we have to have that discussion. And so we have to plan around those things. And those are kind of the projections. And I always project out more than a year. And at this point, you might think that's super overwhelming as a high school student. At least try to project out a year. Do your best to try to do that. Even if you have no clue, just put something down. It gives you a great starting point to starting to think about these things. And as you get older and you have to have more of a rhythmic cycle to your expenditures, it'll be easier to project out longer term. But the last thing you want to do is come up on something like that where we know in October 2021 there's some added expenses that we need to be ready for. If we weren't ready for them now and making plans for them now, then when they happen, we wouldn't be ready. So there you go. There's how I do it. And you're welcome to use any sort of method that you want. But the biggest core things are that you are planning, that you are writing in and tracking your income and your expenses, and that you're categorizing those expenses in ways that make sense for you. What's most important, how to categorize those expenses? How does it make it easy for us to track and make decisions that are the best use of money? All right, I hope that helps. Feel free to ask questions.